going on at the hospital this morning?
Well, obviously they've scaled down the full-scale emergency of yesterday, and now attention is being focused at those patients they're caring for. They still have 5 in the intensive care unit here. We're told that 2 are still life-threatening injuries. Now, if that's burns, you could be talking about days, if not weeks, before you actually know whether they're going to survive. And to give you some idea of the scale of this emergency, one doctor told me today that actually the burns units across the capital were close to capacity.
Juliet, I understand that the Prime Minister paid a visit this morning.
Yes, he did. It was a very private affair. Apparently Tony Blair came here with his wife Sherry and they went up onto the wards. They talked to some of those patients who were well enough to have a few words with them. Also, they thanked the doctors and nurses for their very speedy reaction. Everybody has been praising the emergency services involved in this tragedy for the fact that they reacted so quickly. He also said that he would do everything in his power to try and find out what caused this tragedy.
Juliet, thank you very much.
And speculation about what did cause it is focusing today on whether one of the drivers crossed a red light. The train companies and Railtrack insist it's too early to hazard any guesses. And in a separate move, the government has asked the public inquiry into the Southall train crash 2 years ago to investigate safety implications from yesterday's tragedy too. Our science editor, Lawrence McGinty, has the latest.
What shocked even the experts is the extent of the damage to the 2 trains in yesterday's collision. There is still no indication of how the fire that engulfed the leading carriages was started, but this morning it's clear from the casualty lists that the fire was a major contributory factor to the number of deaths in the disaster. The investigation into those deaths will follow several leads. First, were the signals at fault? On this stretch of track, the signals are only 6 years old, so a technical fault is unlikely. But there are reports that one particular signal has been passed at red several times, perhaps because it's badly placed over the track. Secondly, was there driver error? The slow Thames train was routed onto track 3 as it left Paddington. It's alleged the train passed an amber and a red signal and moved across points to track 2, where it was hit by the Great Western Express. But it's also reported the Express had passed a red signal before reaching those points. Campaigners are calling for ATP, a system that automatically stops the train if it passes a red signal, regardless of the driver's actions. It was first recommended after the Clapham disaster 11 years ago, when 35 people were killed. But it hasn't been universally adopted because of cost. The Great Western Express that collided 2 years ago at Southall was fitted with the system, but it was switched off. We don't know yet whether it was working this time. Those questions will now be examined at the public inquiry set up into the Southall crash. That was delayed for 2 years by legal actions, but now it could extend its scope to yesterday's accident to avoid similar delays.
Perhaps this inquiry can be incorporated into Southall. Obviously, we'll have to speak to our victim clients of Southall to see what their views on that are. It might be this inquiry is going to be much bigger for this crash, but nonetheless, we have got the forum at the moment. We should consider making use of that forum.
Whatever the outcome of these investigations, it seems inevitable that the pressure for new safety measures will become politically irresistible. Lawrence McGinty, ITN.
And a short time ago, ITN spoke to the Transport Secretary, John Prescott, about the inquiry into the crash.
This morning I've been talking to all the parties and will continue to do so all today to make sure that I understand fully what has happened, and I can assure everyone I will leave no stone unturned to make sure everything is being done to make this railway system as safe as possible and that people can then rely on it.
Should the general feeling be today safety at any price on the railways?
Safe railway is the top priority. Nothing can be less than that, and I'm assuring myself today from all these discussions that everything that should be done is being done.
Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Christian Walmar from Rail Magazine. Christian Walmar, obviously this crash should never have happened, but the feature that made it so particularly horrific was the fire that broke out immediately afterwards. Is that unusual in a situation like this?
Yes, that is quite unusual. The railways use diesel, and diesel is not that flammable, and the speed with which the fire took hold is obviously a cause of great concern. Now, the fuel tanks will have been full at that time of the morning because they're fueled up for the day's journeys. Nevertheless, this is going to be a real source of anxiety for the railways, and it is not something they've looked at particularly that closely before.
I was going to ask you, has there ever been a sense in which they've tried to control the flammability of their fuel because of this sort of situation?
No, we have had fires on trains before. I mean, some 20 years ago there was a fire on the Cornish Riviera Express, and a few years ago there was a fire on a train at Maidenhead which killed one person. But the scale of this fire, the speed with which it took hold, all of that is of great concern, and it may well lead to some major rethinking about fire resistance of carriages on the railways.
And possibly the design of carriages. People talked about not being able to get out, not being able to get the doors open.
Yes, I mean, that is always bound to be a problem. The carriage design has improved immeasurably. I mean, I think one of the features of this accident is that so many people were able to walk away from the carriages that weren't affected by the fire, compared to the Clapham disaster, where so many people were killed by the carriage riding up and being smashed into by the undercarriage.
Christian Walmar, thank you.
To other news now, Lady Thatcher looks likely to stir up further controversy at the Conservative Party conference in Blackpool today, when she addresses a fringe meeting in support of General Pinochet. She's already had senior Conservatives rushing to play down her remarks last night that Europe had been the source of all the problems in recent history and the English-speaking nations had solved them. From Blackpool, Joe Andrews reports.
It's that familiar feeling for Tory leaders, seeing your party conference and your policies upstaged by Lady Thatcher's views on Europe. But this morning, Mr Hague put the best possible face on it after her pronouncement last night that in her lifetime all our problems have come from mainland Europe and all the solutions from English-speaking nations.
Oh, I'm very relaxed about that. She was referring to the Second World War and so on, and very relaxed about that.
You completely support that?
Certainly, I'm very happy about that. I've got to let Lady Thatcher be Lady Thatcher, you know. We don't get overexcited about anything.
But others in the Tory party are now calling for Mr Hague to disown Lady Thatcher.
William Hague has made it absolutely clear that we're in Europe. If Margaret Thatcher is trying to imply that there is some magical solution, mythical solution, by becoming an appendage of the United States, then William Hague must disown her immediately.
But Lady Thatcher isn't finished yet. Tonight she'll be speaking to a fringe meeting about another subject close to her heart, General Pinochet's arrest and detention. Her office are billing it as her first contribution to a Conservative conference since her resignation 9 years ago, and she knows it will command attention.
Today's Pinochet Day.
Joe Andrews, ITN, Blackpool.
11-year-olds are doing better in school, with boys narrowing the gap on girls in literary skills. This year's Stage 2 results show that boys reached double targets for reading, rose by 40% last year, while the number of girls reaching that level went up by just 5%.
way back to Old Trafford for treatment.